And we should be going here. Perfect. So, well, we are live. So thank you everybody for joining us today, and welcome to everybody who's joining us and watching us on Facebook Live today. My name is Stephanie Shapiro. I'm the COO of the Together We Stand Foundation. This is the command post, and I'm so lucky to have some special guests with me today. We have individuals representing the military family resource centers from across the country. I have Jackie with me today from the Esquimalt MFRC. I have Maude from the Montreal MFRC. I have Tamara from the Trenton MFRC, and I have Tracy from the Mainland MFRC. So thank you, ladies, so much for joining me today. This is such a pleasure, and I'm so glad we had an opportunity to do this.
Thanks for the invite.
No problem, no problem. So I think we're gonna do a little bit of an education session because we do have quite a few civilians here that watch this show, as well as military families. So I think what we'll do is, first, before we do anything else, I would love for you to tell me a little bit about yourselves and whether or not you're part of the military family and what that kind of looks like. So Jackie, why don't we start with you?
Okay, yes, thanks. Thanks for the opportunity to be here. It's great to see some of my colleagues without face masks on. So pleasure to be here. I've been working in the Military Family Services program for about 25 years in various roles. And currently I have the good fortune to be the executive director at Esquimalt Military Family Resource Center. We're busy, and I know we'll get into more discussion about that later. My husband retired after 32 years of service, and my son continues to serve in the Navy. Currently, he's over on the East Coast doing a little bit of a deployment there. So long history of military service in the family, and yeah, it's a pleasure to be here.
Jackie, have you moved around, like, 32 years of service? Where have you been? Give us an idea.
So yeah, we've moved around, mostly every 3 years, sometimes 2 years. If you look at my resume, it does look like I can't hold a job down, right? Because you move around so much. And we've had the good fortune to live in Halifax, Ottawa, Victoria. As you can tell, my husband is in the Navy. And we also had a great time living outside of the country. He was a military attaché in Warsaw, in Poland. And so we've had some great experiences traveling back and forth many times across the country.
That's great. How long have you been in Victoria now?
So now my husband's retired, and we've been here the longest I've ever been anywhere in my whole life, probably about 10 years.
Ooh. Which is funny because 10 years is a long time when you're part of a military family. So you finally have some roots.
Yeah, but you get restless. So I find myself moving the furniture around so I can create some kind of a new scape.
Move to the house next door,
Yeah, that's
a whole different experience. Maude, tell us, you're coming at us from the Montreal MFRC. What's your role at the MFRC there?
I am the community integration agent here. So I welcome the new families who are coming here. Since we have the recruit school here, we have around 300 families who are coming here. And basically what I do is that I check with them. I just check with them if they're okay with their moving here. Because here we're kind of in another space because they have to redo healthcare. They have to redo everything that you can think of. They have to do it again. It's not, and it's complicated. It could never be easier to do stuff. So I'm a helping hand for them. Sometimes I help them to just join a group of other military spouses here, just to mingle and recreate their social network. And because I live in the PMQs, I am in charge of the community life here in the PMQs in Saint-Hubert. We are covering 3 bases, Long Point, which is in Montreal, Saint-Jean with the recruit school, and Saint-Hubert, which is the it's a really small Air Force base. Most of the people who are working there are reserves. So since Montreal is bilingual, it's complicated here for them to to call it home.
Yeah, I have a whole bunch of questions for you regarding that. So hold off on that. And just really quickly, you were not part of a military family. So you've been working at the MFRC for 5 years, and you were not part of a military
5
family.
years.
And now what happened? Look at you.
I know. I have a friend. The first day I
You got
started,
sucked in.
like, oh, you girl, you gotta grab yourself a military man. Master
That's
Corporal
right.
here.
That's right. You drank the juice. That's what happened.
It's my point to I've never been posted. My boyfriend did, but I've never been posted. So I just hope to make the families here as easy, like their transition here as easy as possible, as I wished I would be welcome somewhere else. So
I love that.
It's my
I want to talk about that really important role.
It's the way I work. It's the way I welcome people. Sometimes I feel like I'm annoying to them, but at the end of the day, I know that they know that I'm here for them, and it's good. And I'm a solution maker.
Tracy, tell us about your time at the Mainland MFRC.
Sure. So the Mainland MFRC is based in Vancouver, and I've been here as the executive director. It was 6 years in January, which is hard to believe. And I have probably, like a number of different people across the country. For example, when I had my interview, they said, you know, are you part of a military family, or do you have any military in your family? And I said, oh, no, I don't, but I'm very supportive of the military. And then as soon as I got out of the interview, I'm like, well, yeah, I had 3 uncles that were in the military. When I was very young, my brother was in the Navy, in Esquimalt, by the way, Jackie. And so, I think for many of us, the military touches us in different places, different parts of our lives. And my background, though, was in the not-for-profit sector. So when this opportunity came, I jumped at it because I was really interested in working with military families, but it fit my kind of career trajectory because it was still within that not-for-profit sector. So it worked really well for me.
And the majority of, and just correct me if I'm wrong, the majority of your families in the associated with the Mainland MFRC are reservists, correct?
That's right, reservists, and we cover quite a large area too. So we, as opposed to the other 3 MFRCs that are represented here, they would have more people, but a smaller area, whereas we have not that many people, but a very large area to cover. So, I mean, when we go visit our families, we fly, we don't even drive because it's too far to go. So,
What areas, just for out of curiosity, what areas do you represent?
All of the province except for Vancouver Island. So we go like Prince George, the Kootenays, the Okanagan, like all over. So yeah.
Excellent. And I have some interesting questions about the reservist families that I'd like to get into in a little bit. But first, let's go over to Tamara. Tamara, tell us about your life at the Trenton MFRC and what your military family looks like.
Well, I've been at the Trenton MFRC as the executive director since 2014, so just a year longer than Tracy. But I was involved with MFRCs for a long time as a volunteer member of the board of directors, which is a fairly I see it from the executive director perspective as a really essential role to me now to have a really good board of directors. But I initially got involved as we were moving. We moved 11 times in 26 years. And I needed to build some kind of social group that was mine. You spend a lot of time in new communities being introduced as your husband's partner, right? And all of your social interactions tend to surround them. And it was really, I found after a couple of moves that I really needed to find people who were my connections, and keeping my brain kind of active as well was really important. I initially started this journey as a paramedic and wasn't able to follow that since provincial legislation was different in every province that we went to, and we moved quite a bit. So now finding myself supporting my passion. We've had a wonderful 35 years in the for the last little while. So definitely getting to support families and hopefully pass on some of that experience. Let people know that they're not crazy. life really is a little different for us, and it's okay.
It is. And you know, one thing I'd really like, and I'll put this out to anybody who feels comfortable answering. You know, my CEO, Rick Seymour, and I had the pleasure last year to start traveling around the country and visiting some MFRCs, which were so important to us because we wanted to make sure that we were getting perspectives directly from, I mean, you guys are the frontline workers when it comes to understanding what the military families go through. And of course, we were able to travel around and visit some MFRCs before COVID hit. And now it's been a little bit challenging. So we've been a bit limited that way. But one of the MFRCs we went to was the Esquimalt MFRC. And we met Jackie and her team there, which was tremendous. And what we realized that I think, I'm a civilian, Rick is a civilian. Before we started understanding the MFRCs, we didn't realize the tremendous role you play in the lives of military families. So maybe before we started digging into some of the questions, for those civilians who are out there watching, just starting to understand what CAF really does, just starting to understand that there are military families out there supporting their members and pretty much, you know, completely a part of that military journey. What role is it, if you had to define it, and we can go around in a circle, what role is it that you see the MFRC playing in the families' lives? And I'll put that out to whoever would like to answer that first.
Sure, I'm happy to take a first stab at that. You know, a few years ago, there was a great report by the Canadian Armed Forces Ombudsman called On the Home Front. And this report really articulated the three really unique pieces of the military family lifestyle that we relocate, as we've just heard, some of us a lot, that we deploy and we're away on operations and away from the home front. And that some of that means that there is a potential exposure to risk and to mental health issues. So these three things together make the lifestyle really unique. And so I would say that these are our areas of subject matter expertise. We always say, you know, information, connection, peace of mind. How can we support families through this unique lifestyle? And I think that it's really important to note that a lot of families do really, really well, and you know, are incredibly resilient. And you know, I know we'll talk about COVID later, but some of the learning and growth that has come from that. But we're just basically here to walk alongside of families as they live this unique lifestyle.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Did anybody else want to add to that? I think that's tremendous, Jackie.
Yeah, Jackie she definitely captured it. The only thing that I would add is that the majority of our efforts are spent walking along with families and sometimes helping them identify their strengths. I think that military families are a humble group. They carry a lot of humility with them, and I don't think they realize quite how strong they are and what a significant role they play in a base like Trenton, where, you know, even during a pandemic, operations, postings, movement has all stayed at the same level as it was pre-pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
So those families have not only dealt with a pandemic, they've also dealt with the normal operations in one of Canada's busiest bases. So yeah, they need to, every once in a while, I think we help remind them of their strength and the actual support that they provide.
And you actually give them, I think that's tremendous. I think you're absolutely right. They're so resilient, and every family that I've met is so humble about their own experiences and is really reluctant to admit how strong they truly are and some of the resiliency that they face in light of all of their challenges. Tracy, I want to go to you for a minute. Tell us about some of the unique, you know, I want to ask some of the others about what it's like to have to be serving reservist families, but what do Reg Force families, but what do the reservist families go through? What are some of the unique challenges or perspectives that the reservist families bring to the table?
And I was thinking as Jackie and Tamara were talking too, and I think it's a really important point that they brought up about walking beside and not holding them by the hand. Because the thing that I always preach to is resilience, not reliance. So it's not, you know, it's that subtle difference between that. And so with the reserve families being part-time military, for the most part, there are some who are classed as reservists who are on full-time contracts. But if we just kind of look at it from that part-time basis, I'm often explaining to people one of the key, well, there's a few key differences. One is often they are spread out. No matter what part of the country you're in, the reserve forces are spread out. So they don't recognize that there's anybody else going through what they're going through. We've had instances where we've managed to bring some families together, and they have found out that they've actually been working in the same building and didn't know that one another worked there, or even that they were in military families. So a lot of it is that bringing together. And then, Jackie touched on those 3 areas of focus that we have. And for the reserve families, it's very similar, except for the posting part. So the reserve families typically stay within their own communities, so they're not moving as much. In terms of that exposure to risk, some of them are deployed. I find that most of them, they would not join if they didn't have any intention of being deployed when they can be. They do have a choice in that, but most of them are looking for the opportunity to serve or to be deployed. And even when they're not, I always remind people that I know in the civilian world too, when they are on exercises, they're not playing with toys either, so
Yes.
even with exercises, there's an element of danger there that we don't understand.
Mm-hmm.
And then the last part that I point out to people as well, in terms of that work-related absence, we often kind of connect that with those deployments when the military member is away. But for the reserve members, oftentimes they are away a lot because many of them will be working full-time or going to school full-time, plus they have their military service. So what that means is one evening a week, approximately one weekend a month, maybe a month or longer during the summer, they are also gone. So when their families would normally say, okay, your job is done, now you're going to be home for the summer. Well, no, not quite. You're going to be home this weekend? Well, no, not really. And so it takes a big toll on their family relationships as well, because they are away for their civilian job as well as their military service too. So we see a lot of issues on families kind of adjusting to that and struggling through that too. So.
Mm-hmm. And I think one of the myths is that, you have the reserve, I think what a lot of civilians don't realize is that reservists, it's exactly like you said, a lot of them can be deployed away from their families for months at a time. And so I think there's not necessarily that recognition. People just kind of think they're just sort of on standby, but I think that they don't understand there's this huge element of training and making sure you're ready to go at any time. It can't just be, you trained 4 years ago and nothing happens since then. You have to remain ready to go.
Yeah, they do. And like I said, they do have a choice in that aspect of it, but most of them want that. They want to do that if they can. And then probably the last thing that I would say, and it just reminded me as you were talking about that, part of the problem is that the reservists don't know that they have access to services that we provide. So a lot of times they're struggling along and they're thinking, oh yeah, that's just for the regular force families. And we're like, no, we're here for you as well. So
how do you create that? How do you get that awareness into the reservist community? And how do you create that community when these individuals are so dispersed?
It's difficult. And I mean, I think one of the things that we realized a couple of years ago was that different than the bases where people are coming and going quite quickly, and you have to get information out quickly, we started to realize we had a whole different look at what our communications were and recognizing that we really do have an obligation to engage and communicate because those people are going to be there for some time. So rather than just pushing information out to them, it really is trying to engage them more, get to know them because they will continue to be there. So it is a bit of a tough slog. And we all have challenges around getting the information we need in order to serve the families. That's across the board, whether it's Reg Force or Reserve. But I have to say that it's very much just a concerted communications effort and keeping at it and building some trust with them too, because a lot of times they've had people come in and say, oh yeah, we're here for you too. And then they're not, like they just disappear. So it's a matter of trust on that too.
Absolutely. Maude, I want to go over to you. You're coming from the Montreal MFRC, and I find your region to be so interesting because, you have, and I'm curious to know in terms of Valcartier and Bagotville, if this is the same, what happens when you have Anglophone families coming into the Montreal MFRC? How do, and maybe, and I suppose there's a reversal too. You have Anglophone families coming into the MFRCs trying to adapt to the Francophone language and lifestyle. And what are some challenges that you see? And then what are some of the challenges that Francophone community might realize as they're moving out of their own community?
First and foremost, when I get in touch with the families, I tell them to breathe in and breathe out. It's going to be okay, because historically, Montreal region, not Bagotville or Valcartier, but Montreal region has been seen as like the don't go there posting, because of the language barrier. Because
more so than Valcartier and Bagotville?
More so.
Wow.
Because Valcartier is an operational base.
Mhm.
So they do go on missions, they do go on exercises, they do. Quebec City is a military city.
Mhm.
So they do, when you come out of your car wearing your combat, they know who you are and they know where you're coming from. So they will make the extra effort to speak in English. They will make the extra effort to accommodate you.
Mhm.
Even if, but there's a language barrier in Valcartier and more so in Bagotville, because Bagotville, it's an Air Force base, but it's a base far from the cities. Valcartier is directly close to the city.
Okay.
It's a bit like Montreal, but Montreal, there's no deployment, no exercises. So they know that they're stuck here.
So who are the families that you're serving in Montreal then? What does that look like? Why are families typically posted to Montreal? And help walk us through that.
We have the recruit school.
Mm.
So a lot of Anglophones, because we do have French platoons and English platoons. So they need both language instructors.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why we have, and here in the PMQs, it's half and half. So we have half Francophones and half Anglophones. But you can feel amongst the neighborhoods or the cities where the militaries are that there's this unity in between the families.
Mm-hmm.
The language barrier here, it's really tough, even though if at the MFRC we do offer second language classes for the families. Even if the city is known as bilingual, it's not an obligation for the people for the health card. If you call there, it's not an obligation for the speaker on the phone to speak English to you.
Right.
And that causes frustration, and that causes that spouses arrive at my door screaming at me because they can't have their health card.
Right.
Which is
so
fine.
how do you support, how does the MFRC support that if it's such a challenge for families coming in? I know you're there to make that transition easier. How do you support that?
We make contacts with different organizations and different government levels so that we can make them understand, because here in Quebec, the militaries are are seen differently than other provinces. For example, I'm from New Brunswick. I was born in New Brunswick. So I know that if you're walking around Gagetown or Edmonton, New Brunswick, or Moncton, and you're walking around in your combat, people will respect you more.
Mm-hmm.
You have to work.
It's a different culture in Quebec.
It's not a part of the culture here to be respected as a military, to be happy. People here is, if you are someone who, because I do know people who fought at the Second World War, and when they meet another military, they do thank them for the services and vice versa. But normal civilians like me, before I was in this relationship, never cared about the militaries here.
Right. I actually want to come back to that because that's a very interesting point.
So when I have people who are coming in and comparing Montreal with, I don't know, Trenton or Kingston, for the atmosphere, for the way militaries are seen, and what were the difficulties, because it was more easier for them in Trenton, for example. It's something that has been called on and on and on. And yes, and that's why we're meeting with different governmental levels, with different organizations, to make them understand. Even with school boards, we have meetings with school boards to make them understand what military lifestyle is, what's the reality of it.
Well, I think what you're saying right now probably resonates so deeply with the other individuals on this call here, because I think what's so important for civilians to understand, and for military families who maybe aren't as familiar with MFRCs need to understand, is that the MFRCs really do act as advocates for the families within the communities, within the businesses, within the government, within the politicians, to really help them understand some of the challenges that that these families face. And I respect that so dearly. Jackie, tell us about, you represent a ton of Navy families. Tell us about that community and what your MFRC looks like because of it, because my understanding is that the deployment tempo is so different compared to Air Force and Army.
Right. And that comes and goes with other bases. For us, what we call our operational tempo is steady. So currently we've got about 2,000 military members away, either at sea or in an air detachment. We've got some folks on land deployment. So for us, deployment is a constant. And, frankly, through COVID, it's even been, I think, more challenging, obviously, for families on the home front, but also because there's quarantine required. So, you have members away for, 6 months plus, several weeks for quarantine. And I think that families and members, and I know that our chain of command here in Esquimalt have been worried about people's mental health. What is that like to be in a small hotel room for 2 weeks in quarantine, and what are some of the mental health impacts around that? We have some creative families who will often, they can like visit through the window or wave at one another and drop off care packages, but it's unique right now in terms of deployment. One of the other things that is different is that, a ship, a big frigate of 240 people will, go away for 6 months, and then they can usually make visits and do ports of call. And of course, right now they're not able to. So they're 6 months pretty much on that ship, although the Navy has worked pretty hard to, even if you can come alongside and have a little cordoned off area so they can get off the ship. Right. Amazing how that helps. So I think there's been some added pressure on members and families during this pandemic. But yeah, for us, deployment is a huge pivotal cornerstone of how we work with families. And again, we just work with them through the cycle of deployment and some of the highs and lows. And life happens when our members are away, all kinds of hard things and joyous things. And so it's just that walking alongside, as Tracy mentioned, that is so important.
One of the things that really stood out to Rick and myself when we were out there visiting, we had the amazing opportunity to workshop with some of your families and just really listen to some of the experiences that they had. And my understanding, again, correct me if I'm wrong, versus and not to take anything away from the Army, where they have maybe more notice in terms of their deployment opportunities because it's such a large part of the military. And it was my understanding that the Navy is not necessarily very big. And so it was my understanding that you had some families that they were, you had the member on deployment and they would come back. And very quickly after that, because there's not that many people to fill those slots, they're deploying again. And these families were saying that their spouse, their mother, their father was away for 200 and something days of the year. Yeah. How does that impact those families? Or is it just a normal part of life now because this is what they do?
Yeah, no, we call that jetty jumping. It happens a lot. I can see Tamara smiling because she lived
I
that
lived it.
reality
Yeah.
very much so. And I do think that that it does have a high impact on the family, that, you know, coming home, getting all adjusted back to being back together, and then off you go again. I think it has a huge impact on the home front and on your family lifestyle. And, you know, we do a lot of work with families to help them with that. We call it return and reunion. And also the military members on board ship are getting some of the same information. And it's about how you're this constant integrating back into the home and then pulling yourself out of the home. And so we've got resources like parenting from afar, so that, you know, the parent on board the ship can learn how to still have some relevant impact as a parent and be away, you know, as you say, 200 days a year. The Canadian Navy's also done an incredible job at making the ships more accessible. So now they have Wi-Fi, and so there's a lot more
Thank goodness.
connectivity. I know, and they're reading to one another and all of those things. Sometimes that's a good thing, sometimes not so much, but I think that it's, if families can speak to one another, stay connected, read a story to a little one, I think this really helps in terms of that strong feeling of connectivity. That's super important for people, obviously. Yeah.
And I want to go over tomorrow. I just have I have Rick, my CEO, texting me, letting me know what's happening on the Facebook Live portion of everything, and he's telling me that we have, I'm going to butcher this, we have individuals watching from Saint-Jean-sur-Richelieu. We have individuals coming in from Regina. Did I say it right, Maude? Maybe? Did I like kill it completely?
St. John would have been fine too. Okay, I've heard it.
Okay, we'll go with Saint Jean. Regina, we have Belleville, Trenton, Dartmouth, London, and Toronto. So thank you to everybody who's joining us today. And if you have any questions to ask these lovely ladies, please feel free to do it. And Rick will communicate that over to me. Tamara, I want to talk about, you represent a huge Air Force base. Tell us about what sort of some of the unique challenges you see from individuals who are families that represent the Air Force.
Well, generally speaking, when we start to talk about differences, like everybody does experience separation, they all experience risk and postings. But in Trenton, we have, and other Air Force bases obviously will experience similar, but we rapid redeployment. So you have flight crews that are constantly flying, you have maintenance crews that are constantly on the move, you have deployment, regular, 4-6 month deployments happening. So no deployment, each family that walks through the door or contacts us has their own deployment experience. So it could be any of the above. And kids really do feel that experience of, is mom or dad home today, or are they not home today? Who knows? A lot of times you'll have, and it's funny when you hear youth, between the ages of 13 and like 16, 17, they are probably the most politically aware of whatever is going on geopolitically in the world, because, especially at an Air Force base, they don't get anywhere without airplanes. So any part of the military that's on the move or doing something needs to be transported and supplied. So when something surprising happens in the world, we often know that families will be experiencing unpredicted or unplanned or deployment or separation. So it is fairly like a roller coaster, which can be a lot of fun too. I'm just saying, having the time where families have their time apart, always in our family, the strange traditions pop up. When dad was away, first night, ice cream for supper. So the kids always looked on it as a positive thing when they found out he wasn't going to be home, because most of the time there was no real way to prepare them to say, oh, 3 more sleeps and dad's gone. No, this afternoon, dad came home packed and left, right? So those are the kinds of things that Trenton families usually work with, but it's constantly changing, and we work with each family individually to meet their needs based on what is happening in their families this moment.
Yes. Yeah, I think that's so critical. I want to ask, Tracy, you said something very interesting, and we hear this a lot. how is it that, how do you go for, from militaries needing a hand up, not a hand out, creating, not creating dependency, but creating that resiliency and offering just sort of that support? How do you go about doing that?
I think maybe it goes back a little bit to what Jackie said quite a bit earlier. She said that, one of the first things that we need to do is make sure people understand that the majority of families are doing great. They love to serve, they're doing well, they're healthy, so if you start from that premise, then you're not always looking to say, oh, what do you need? What do you need? What do you need? So if you start from that premise, and then again, going back to what I said about communication, a lot of times we have kind of gone down a wrong path in terms of how we look at whether or not we're doing our job, because we look at it in terms of how many people come in and use our services. Well, really, that's not actually what I want to know. If I have a social worker, I actually don't want her family counseling appointments to go up. I want them to go down.
Right.
So it's a matter of starting to measure and putting more attention on whether or not people are aware of the MFRC and how the MFRC can work with them. So again, starting from the premise that most people are doing great, making sure that people know who we are and what we do. And then that kind of takes care of that idea of, like you said, making that difference between a hand up rather than a hand out. And just one other quick thing too, when Maude was talking, Maude, that reminded me a lot of what happens in Vancouver too. So again, you have differences on the geographic area. So while we do take care of the whole province, our offices are in Vancouver, big city, not a lot of people are even aware there's military in the city. So a big part of what we do is just let people know, hey, did you know that you have military members who possibly are your neighbors or do, and most people are very interested. They're like, really? I thought that building downtown was just a museum. I didn't know it was an operational base. So part of it is that too. So it's the communications and the awareness on both the civilian and the military side.
I have a question coming in actually from individuals who are watching. How is it that you work with the community to create that awareness, to let them know there are military families in your community that are here and that are going through these unique challenges? How do you create those relationships? And I'll put out to whoever would like to go first.
I spend, and everybody here, we all spend, everybody in the community knows that I will stop and talk about the military environment and the environment for military families at the drop of a hat. There isn't a politician in the community that doesn't maybe think about turning the other way when they see me coming.
Oh no, it's Tamara, right?
Yeah. Well, because there are certain things that are big priorities in our community, and educating the community about the experience of military families. We just went through a project where we're working on how to impact healthcare, access to healthcare in a positive way. It's one of the key areas where families struggle. Each time they move to a new province, each time they move to a new city, they have to get doctors and put all their healthcare pieces back into place as soon as they move. And military families, the thing that I was most surprised as I did this talking tour around the community was that the majority of civilians didn't know that military families do not get their healthcare from the military, that they access healthcare just like any other civilian family. And so if you're moving 11 times in 26 years, getting any kind of consistent care is incredibly challenging. So yeah, we spend a lot of our times talking to government officials, talking to community groups, partnering with community groups to provide services, to fill gaps that may be there in the community for our families. And we spend an awful lot of time doing it because, and I keep saying this often, is it doesn't take a village to raise a military family. It really does take a whole country. And we spend a lot of time talking about that.
Yeah, yes, and you do some fantastic work. So thank you for all you do. And it's funny that you said, that the military doesn't cover the healthcare, because even when speaking with donors, we're just so uneducated in terms of what the military families go through. They're like, what do you mean the military doesn't pay for housing? No, that's completely a myth. They have to cover it all on their own. I have a question coming here from Sharon. It's a very specific question, but I think it's a really good one because it talks about, we talk about children, and all the changes that children go through as they get posted. This question says, I live very close to Shearwater, Nova Scotia, and I'm curious to know what types of specific resources do the MFRCs offer for junior high or high school students? Just in general, maybe you guys can speak to that.
Yeah, that's in our location, it's a challenge. We find things go in cycles. We'll go through a period of time where the needs around really young families are really important. We're just emerging and getting some data on the fact that we have some young teenagers, and youth leadership opportunities are often very much lacking for that age group. So during the pandemic, we've been running some youth programming, and we do have a youth resiliency coordinator at our center. So we're very lucky, who runs some programming, but MFRCs, it depends on the cycles and the families and the numbers. So if she does get in touch with her local MFRC and say, hey, I'm seeing this need for my family, either, do you provide anything, or is there a community entity that may be able to support me as well? So definitely a worthy question worth asking.
Excellent. A question of mine, a bit more of a sensitive topic, because I'm so mindful to make sure that whoever we interact with, we're communicating the fact that these families are so resilient in light of the challenges that they're constantly facing, and these moves and new schools and new healthcare, and the fact that there's no job consistency necessarily because of occupational certifications. Tell me what COVID looks like for some of these families. You're not necessarily the ones who are doing very well, because there are families that are doing very well, of course. What are some of the unique challenges that we see these families facing because of COVID? Jackie, let's go over to you.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think that that COVID has, for all families, has created unique challenges. And so we certainly see a lot of some of the struggles around isolation, and feeling lonely. And, if there are issues in the household, it's very hard to be there and not to be able to reach out. And so I think we all just did a giant, and if you'll pardon the well-used word, pivot, to make sure that our families could be connected. But I know for our social workers, provided a lot of virtual counseling, but also recognize that if there are struggles in the household, you can't sit in your house and receive that service. And so, we've got some creative ways that we connect with families. If we're going for a walk, you mentioned youth, we have quite a high demand for youth mental health and youth counseling. And so going sitting on the beach, going for a walk, meeting in a park, which of course is a luxury I know that we have on the West Coast. Very early on in the pandemic, families were even struggling to go and get groceries, right? Everything was locked down. They've got their children with them, their partners away deployed. How are they going to make their way through the grocery store? And so we did a lot of work with our community partners and grocers. And we were able to have military families prioritized, because some folks are waiting 2 or 3 weeks for their grocery deliveries.
That's right. The deliveries were like 2 or 3 weeks behind.
Yes. So that's those partnerships. But I think too, it's really important, and it's important also for your donors to know. I know that we at Esquimalt MFRC have really benefited from the ways in which Together We Stand has supported our families who are having a crisis. Because yes, we are resilient, but resilience doesn't mean that we're always doing well. Right. Resilience actually means knowing how to reach out and knowing how, when you don't have any tools left in your toolkit. So I know that many of our families have really benefited from having that little bit of extra support that your donors bring. We have a family who has a little guy who's terminally ill, and they needed to travel back and forth to Vancouver, and mom had to leave work, and it was very financially really tough for them. So to be able to help them a little bit with that just meant the world. meant the world of difference for them.
Well, that's a good segue. I want to be mindful of everybody's time. I can't believe it's already 8:45. And Tracy, I know I promised you that you would be off in time before your next meeting. And I'd actually like to do a part 2 of this because there's so many more questions that I have of all of you. And I think you offer so much support to these families. And it's so important for these families and civilians to know the important role that you play in the lives of military families. Perhaps we can finish it off with going around and number one, what is it that you want civilian families and civilian members to know about your military families, and how might organizations like Together We Stand and other military organizations be able to offer support to MFRCs? Maude, maybe we'll go over to you.
I used to meet the civilian families when they're signing in. And I always start the presentation of our services by saying that as a civilian myself, I understood quickly that military life and civilian life are two different worlds, and that organizations like MFRCs are there to help one cope with the reality shock that, when you're in the army, nothing is white, nothing is completely black. It's sometimes gray or grayish. And that, yes, it's going to be tough. Yes, it's going to be hard. Yes, it's going to be easy. But MFRCs are the key for the military career and the military life to work. You might not need the MFRC services first year, but you know that MFRCs are present for you and will be with you during the whole career of the military member, wherever you are across the country.
I love that. That's got to be such a comfort for these families to know that wherever they go, maybe not always consistent programming in terms of, some of the unique services that are offered, but there are always individuals within their corner to kind of help them out along the journey. Tracy, what is it that you might like civilians to know, and how might organizations like ours be able to help?
I think part of it, I mentioned before, part of it is, again, just be aware there are military families among you. So they are there, they are serving, they are doing things domestically as well as internationally. Sometimes people don't recognize how they're serving in other ways. So that would be what I'd want people to know, is just to be aware you have them in your communities. They're there, they're serving all of us. And then in terms of how we can help, is just we do a lot of facilitation. So we are always, again, with the reserve community, because they're kind of staying around, we're working with service providers to find out what they have available. And Tamara hit a bit on that as well. And so part of it is, being open to the fact that we might come in looking for some supports in some area. Doesn't mean that we need everything that you've got, but just give us that opportunity to, we're trying really hard to tailor the needs tailor what we provide to the needs of the family based on what's available in the community. So that's why, just allowing us to be able to build those relationships, find out what's out there, and then help the families get to those services is great if we can do that. So.
Perfect. And Tamara?
Just knowing that MFRCs are in the communities where there's, concentrations of military families. Reach out to your MFRC if you want to know more. Please do so. Yearly, we give tours to community councils that are around us. Always a lovely time, truly enjoy it. If you want to know more about your military community and the families in particular, because of course we don't speak for the military side of the house, but yeah, call us and engage, and we'll be more than willing to help with your understanding. If you've got a community group, services or supports, we have a great community of volunteers that are military family members, and they volunteer in all kinds of organizations in your communities. So please get a hold of us, and we'll create a relationship.
That's great. And Jackie, close us out.
Yeah, it's true. And I know this has been said about reservists, but I think it's also true of military members and their families that they're twice the citizen. You know, they're contributing in their community and they're contributing to the defense of our country. I think at the end of the day, where, you know, the kinds of things that help us are finding ways that we can walk each other home at the end of the day. You know, we're here just to walk alongside of people, and we oftentimes do need help to do that.
Mhm. No, well, thank you so much for all of you being here today. We in the Together We Stand family have tremendous respect for the work that you do for the families. You not only support the families, but you act as fantastic voices and guidance to our team in terms of the programs that are needed, in terms of the gaps that we can help to fill. So you are a tremendous resource to the entire community, and we thank you all for your work, and we look forward to continuing to partner with you. So thank you all for spending some time with me this evening. I really appreciate it, and I hope that you all come back and do it with me again, because I still have 15, 20 other questions that I need to be asking you. So thank you all, and have a great
Thank you
evening.
very
Thanks
much.
to everybody watching tonight.
Thanks,
Bye.
Stephanie.